used to work at Advanced Auto Parts as a delivery driver and was one of the only 4 women that worked there at the time. 2 of them were middle-aged and the third decently older, all 3 having been there for a decent amount of time. So basically, I was the new, young, pretty girl who knew her way around a car in a predominantly male work environment. That alone comes with its own set of issues, but it was nothing I hadn't dealt with before. On my first day, I made an instant friend in Jeremy. He was laid back, funny, and good at his job without being overbearingly professional. I guess that's why it kind of struck me when he looked at me very seriously and told me to watch myself around Louis. Now let's talk about Louis for a second. He was probably in his late 40s or early 50s, definitely old enough to be my dad. He wore glasses with the big 70s wire frames, had scraggly gray hair that poked from under his hat in greasy curly tufts, and his teeth were stained brown from years of dipping tobacco and apparently never owning a toothbrush. He had a slew of youngins, his own words, and referred to his wife as his old lady. A picture-perfect example of what folks around here call white trash. But I was raised not to judge people and was friendly with him nonetheless. I just figured he was a typical old pervert that was kind of creepy around younger women. Things were going well until about 3 months into working there when I hit a deer with my car, completely destroying the entire front end. As circumstances would have it, 2 days before that, my then boyfriend wrecked and totaled his truck as well, leaving us with no way to go. A few days after the accident, ex-boyfriend decided that he was better off moving back in with his mom and left. We had just moved in together and now I was going to be living alone in an apartment with no car and my family on the other side of town. With much protest from my mother, I began walking to and from work while trying to rebuild my car, as I only lived about 3 miles from the store and the small city I lived in had no means of public transport. Obviously, the people at work noticed that I was walking back and forth, and a few offered me rides home and to come get me in the mornings, but I always declined. I honestly enjoyed the walk. One day, as I was about to walk out of the parking lot and around the back of the building, Louis came around the front corner, hand in the air, to flag me down. "Where you going, girlie?" he asked, his voice thick with a Cajun accent. "Heading home for the day, man. I'll see you tomorrow," I replied. "You know, I'd give you a ride home if you wanted. Might even let you drive my baby." He had a brand new Mustang GT, matted black, and he thought it was the shit. "Is that right?" I joked, both of us knowing there was no way in hell I was getting in a car with him. "Yeah, for sure. You just can't tell nobody about it, though." Okay, that was a weird comment to make. Hoping for the best, I said, "What, tell them you let me drive?" Chuckling, he said, "Nah, that you was ever with me at all. I don't like to put myself out there like that, you know?" No, I don't know, and I was genuinely creeped out at that point. I laughed it off awkwardly and just walked away. Once I was sure I was out of sight of him, I pulled my pocket knife out of my backpack and put it in my pocket for a better sense of security. After that, Louis just got progressively weirder. He would follow me outside for my smoke breaks, even though he didn't smoke. He offered to take me home a few more times, always under the premise that I keep it between the 2 of us, even making it a point to let me know that he knew which apartment complex I lived in, just not which building. I was already past the point of being creeped out, but didn't want to make a fuss about it at work. I was going through enough in my personal life already. I was still relatively new to the job, and Louis had worked there for years with no issues other than that he was known to be a weird dude. But the breaking point came when I got scheduled for a closing shift, just me and Louis. I dreaded it the entire week, but again, I didn't want to cause a big issue at work. After all, he hadn't done anything to me, and I hadn't told him to leave me alone or anything. He was just so fucking weird. The day of our closing shift finally rolled around, and I was just ready to have it over with. I had already arranged for a male friend to come pick me up that night since the store closed after dark, and I was already pretty sure Louis had followed me home at least once by this point. How else would he have known where I live? I'm careful not to divulge where I live to just anyone and everyone. 5:30 came and everyone left for the day, leaving me alone with Louis. We closed at 8, so I only had to make it a couple of hours with him and it would be over. While business was steady, everything was fine. But after about 7, there wasn't a single customer in the store. We were chatting with each other, just normal coworker small talk, when he asked me how my ex and I were doing. He knew when I got hired I had a boyfriend, but I obviously hadn't updated him to my new relationship situation. We split up, I told him simply. He couldn't deal with neither of us having a vehicle. Louis said something I'm sure he thought was wise about couples struggling together, blah blah blah. I smiled and agreed with him and hoped we could change the subject now. Instead, he moved closer towards me. I automatically flinched slightly as he began to speak again, so close to my face I could smell his breath. That's why you need a real man, honey. You know, a grown man. He put his hand on my lower back and I sidestepped his touch. My mind was screaming at me to get the hell out, but was that even an option? Yes, this was definitely inappropriate and overstepped the boundaries of the workplace, but there were no cameras in the store. Would anyone even believe me? He laughed and asked if I was uncomfortable. I decided to just be honest and told him I was. There was no use lying. I knew my body language had given away my nervousness. He apologized casually and walked off to the back of the store behind the battery rack and out of sight. I took the opportunity to text my friend and tell him to go ahead and come to the store and wait for me outside, quickly recounting what had just happened. Louis emerged with the push broom and I realized it was 7:35. Thank God, only a little while longer. As he was sweeping and I was cleaning up around the parts counter, Louis started up conversation again. We were still the only two in the store. Yeah, I didn't mean to freak you out or nothing earlier, you know? Yeah, man, I know. It was just kind of inappropriate for work. Yeah, you're right. If we was out of town now, that'd be a different story, huh? I mean, it'd be more appropriate than at work, but we work together, man. It's just weird. Ain't nothing weird about a man and a woman having a good time, girlie. This guy was just not taking the hint. I didn't know what to say, so I just stopped responding. But Louis just didn't stop talking. He told me we could go out of town if I didn't want people seeing us together. We could keep it a secret. We could have fun. He knows how to show a lady a good time. His cousin works front desk at the motel out by the interstate. He'd give us a room under a fake name, no questions asked. I just stared ahead and out the front doors, desperately waiting for my ride to get there. I was beyond caring about my reputation at work. I'd deal with the consequences later, but for now I had to leave as soon as possible. I grabbed my backpack so that I could bolt as soon as I saw headlights in the parking lot. Suddenly, a hot breath was on the back of my neck, and Louis was standing right behind me, his erection showing through his pants and almost touching me. You know, I'd eat it really good, right? He whispered breathily in my ear, sending chills of fear and nausea down my entire body. I ran out from behind the counter and out the front door. My ride wasn't there yet, but I didn't care, and I didn't slow down as I sprinted through the parking lot and out into the darkness. I ran in the opposite direction than I knew my friend would be coming, and he picked me up from the side of the road almost a mile from the store. My manager called and called, but I never answered or replied, and I never went back. I did, however, keep in touch with Jeremy and told him about what had happened that night and the events that led up to it. About 6 months after I left, Jeremy sent me a link to an article from our town's online newspaper. Louis's wife and mother had been arrested for holding down his 12-year-old daughter while the grandmother's 70-something-year-old boyfriend sexually assaulted her. Louis had no part in the assault, but no one can convince me that he didn't know it was happening. Louis, let's never meet again. I hate we ever met in the first place. A bit of backstory. I live in a pretty upscale neighborhood, little to no crime, expensive houses with rich people. They all have large estate houses with remote gates, which is why I couldn't just run up to one later. Despite this, I'm not naive. I gave myself a curfew for when I go for walks. Be home by 7:30. This only applies when I'm walking around the neighborhood alone. The place I live in is a beautiful area too, under a mountain surrounded by trees and wildlife, so I go for walks very often in order to clear my head. Daylight savings had just ended, so it was getting dark early. I'm young, easily identifiable as underage. I'm very short, and I also have a bit of a baby face, so I look a few years younger than I am most days. The day that this occurred, I had just attended a funeral, a close relative. So when we got home, it was around 6:45 and already getting dark. I decided to go for a walk, still in my funeral attire. Remember how I said it was a rich neighborhood? Well, even my mourning clothes reflected that. I was in a short black dress with a flare skirt, black slip-on shoes, sheer black stockings, a black bow in my hair, and a black faux fur jacket. I hated this outfit. It made me feel like a little girl. It also made me look like one. Anyway, I headed out. The streetlights were already on and the sky was kind of purple. I'm sorry if this is TMI, but this incident made it stick in my head vividly. I headed away from my usual pathway through the trees and instead decided to walk to a small park about 2 kilometers from my home. I had a book with me and I sat on the swing set for a while reading. But there was a constant sensation of being watched. I kept looking around, but after seeing no one, I pinned it down to paranoia. I didn't realize how late it had gotten until I glanced at my watch. 7:36 p.m. I began to walk home in a hurry, so at first I didn't notice the small blue Subaru following me. When I did notice, I took a couple of back roads just to make sure. The car was definitely tailing me. I stopped and stared at it, and it drove past slowly. Tinted windows rolled right up. It turned a corner about a block ahead of me in the path I had to take to get home. I worried he had just parked out of view and contemplated crossing the road, but I would still have to walk back over to get home, so I just continued walking. Bad choice. When I got to the corner, there was the car, headlights off, door wide open. A man stood there, tall and a bit skinny, thin eyes, plain black cap on his head. He was a bit tan and had a goatee. I would later tell the police this description. He smiled when he saw me and stood right in front of me. Now, at this point, I'm scared shitless. I want to book it, but because I was wearing slip-ons, I'd definitely fail if I tried. "Hello there," the man said cheerily. There wasn't anything immediately off about his voice, but the happiness sounded forced and the situation was creepy enough already. Hi, I responded warily. Don't know why I responded. It was a stupid decision. "It's a bit late for a young lady to be walking around in a place like this, isn't it?" he asked, smiling at me, leaning against the fence of the house we were next to. As I said, this was an upscale place with almost no crime, so that statement made no sense. "I'm not young, I'm 15, and I'm going home now, excuse me," I said, trying to walk past him. Don't have any idea why I said that. I was raised to be polite, and this guy, at the time, hadn't really done anything, so I'm guessing I was just being stupid. His smile faltered a bit when I said I was 15, but it was back on his face within a second. He turned slightly, allowing me to pass, but began to walk beside me. "Even so, shouldn't you already be at home? It's already dark," he said. I sped up my walk, but he matched my pace easily. "Look, man, I'm just trying to get home. Please go away," I said. My heart was pounding. At that point, I was already imagining my death. I just don't feel comfortable allowing a young girl to walk alone at night. How about I give you a ride home? My car is just back there. He pointed behind us. No thanks. It's not that far. I'm fine, I said, putting my hand in my pocket and touching my phone. I wasn't going to take it out in front of him, but if he could get far enough away, I'd call home and get someone to pick me up. I insist. If it isn't that far, we'll get there twice as fast, he said. But his eyes were dark and his smile seemed more menacing. Suddenly, I remembered something. Just a street away, there was an old lady who lived in a big house but had a normal fence. I'd done garden work for her occasionally. I needed cash, so she knew me fairly well. I calculated how far the distance was in my head and quickly began to power walk in that direction. The man quickly jogged to catch up to me. Hey, I said I'll give you a ride, he said. The smile was gone and he sounded pissed. It's really close. I don't need a ride. Fuck off, creep. I could see the house now and made my way to it as fast as I could. Just as I was at the gate, the man grabbed my arm. Listen here, you little bitch. Then, in a huge stroke of luck, the old lady opened her front door. I've never felt more relieved than I did at that exact moment. The man quickly let go of me and ran off. I ran over to the lady who had seen some of what had happened out of her living room window, and she let me inside. After explaining what had happened, I called home to get someone to pick me up. My carer was visibly upset and wanted to call the cops, and we did. They said that seeing as he hadn't done more than grab my arm, there wasn't really anything they could do. There wasn't a visible mark to prove it, and they weren't going to drive over to look at cameras. I'm still mad about that because then they may have been able to prevent what happened next. About a week later, I saw the man on the news. He had been arrested for abducting and sexually assaulting a 7-year-old girl in a neighborhood near us. As soon as I saw this, I phoned the police again. I had to give a statement, and as it stands, he's serving a long time in prison. Regardless, pedophile creep who tried to give me a ride, have fun in there. I've heard people in there don't take too kindly to people like you. I'm a woman that works night audit at a small hotel property in a small-ass town. I'm used to working alone, and it takes quite a bit to scare me or freak me out. I have dealt with domestic disturbances, hostile homeless men twice my size, and helped get rid of the prostitution problem on our property. Over 2 years ago, it's no longer an issue here. So when I say that this man really creeped me the fuck out, know it means a lot. What is it with this week, man? Every night has been some other dumpster fire for me to put out. But oh boy, does tonight's particular creepy dumpster fire take the cake. So I'm sitting at the desk, browsing Reddit as you do, when a guest heads my way from the first floor rooms. I don't think much of it. He gets up to me and picks up a brochure for a rewards program and starts asking me about it. No big deal. It's legit my job to answer these questions. He starts off his questions standing catty-corner to me and ends up right in front of me. He says thanks and leaves. Was he kind of awkward? Yes, but nothing I haven't dealt with before. About 5 to 10 minutes pass, and here he comes again, this time saying that a friend of his is supposed to come pick him up, wants to know if anyone has come by asking about him. I tell him no, that no one has been in a while. Honestly, this was my first mistake, but hindsight and all that. He paces back and forth in the lobby for a few minutes before asking if he can stand to the side of the front desk, almost right next to me, as something was wrong with his neck and he couldn't see out the door properly. Red flag number 2, because there was a couch directly in front of me that had a section that if you sat there, you could face the door/parking lot, but I apparently lost my damn mind tonight. I say I guess. He stands there and starts asking questions about his room, saying that he was supposed to be transferring to a suite tomorrow. we are an all-suites property. I said I don't know anything about that, but asked for his last name so I could check. He wouldn't tell me his name. He kept mouthing something at me, and then whispering something just barely audible. It really seemed to me that he wanted me to lean in to hear what he was trying to say, but hell no, man. By this point, I was already uncomfortable and just stared at him, telling him several times that I'm hard of hearing and he will need to speak up. When that didn't work, I asked what his room number was so I could look it up that way. He said he didn't remember. Okay. I asked what floor he's on. He says he doesn't know. Now I watched him come from the first floor rooms and knew that he was staying down there. I just wasn't sure which room he was in. So now I know that for some reason he doesn't want me to know which room he is staying in, and for some reason this makes me start to feel really unsafe. He finally gives me the last name, Johnson. I tell him we have no one here under that name. He says, oh, maybe it's under my boss's name, but can't give me the name for that either. He then says maybe it's under his company name, but he told me he works for the highway patrol for a small mechanic shop, Joe Dirt Mechanics, and that he works general construction under a contractor whose name he doesn't know. While he tells me all this, he keeps doing that weird whisper thing, trying to get me to lean closer to him. But my brain is flashing red neon warning signs and screaming, "Danger Will Robinson! Danger Will Robinson!" as loud as possible. So I print a random piece of paper off the computer and tell him I need to step into the back office to make some copies. He seems to take the hint and heads back down the hallway, leaving me free to freak out in the back, but also free to grab my pepper spray. As I walk back out, I realize that instead of actually leaving, he just moved around the corner, out of sight, to wait for me to come back to the desk. I feel better armed with my pepper spray, and I'm ready to haul ass and lock myself in the back office if he tries anything. This time he doesn't stay long, just asks about the restaurant he can see out the door/windows. He wants to know if he would be safe walking down there by himself. I tell him he will be fine, that I walk down there by myself all the time and have never had any problems. Stupid, I know. Super fucking stupid. He angles for a ride for a bit, but I lied on this one and told him I didn't have a car. He leaves and heads down to this restaurant while I'm just glad this seems to be over. He's only gone around 15 minutes when he walks back in the door carrying a cup from the restaurant, saying how he didn't like the food there. I tell him that's too bad and make myself look busy with paperwork. He seems to take the hint and leaves again. By this point, every interaction with him has left me feeling more creeped out and unsafe than the last, and I started texting my husband telling him what was going on. The last time I saw him last night, I heard him coming down the hall because he was on the phone, and when I looked up, he was staring at me really intently, so I gathered some papers and went into the back office to avoid him. I heard him pass the desk and go out the doors, so I peeked into my manager's office to see him standing at her window, peering in, trying to see me from there. I called my husband at that point and told him to haul ass up here because I can't do this anymore. As I'm on the phone, I get the courage to peek back around the corner to the manager's office/window he was peeping into and notice that he's gone. I told my husband to be on the lookout for this guy walking outside of the hotel or between the hotel and the restaurant. I look out the window and don't see him anywhere, but go back to hiding just in case. My husband comes flying into the parking lot and comes in to find me hiding in the back, telling me that he looked everywhere and didn't see anyone. Within 1 minute, this creepy guy comes in the front door trying to talk to me over my husband, but after a very murderous look from my wonderful man, he booked out of the lobby and didn't come back in the rest of the night. I had my husband stay to play security guard just in case, but nothing came of it until this morning, when the housekeeper filling in for the regular breakfast attendant lets me know that this same guy was around yesterday morning and was denied a room by our manager for creeping out the housekeeper. The manager even had to go with her to take out the trash because this guy was so unsettling. Apparently, he came back after the manager left for the day and got a room from the one man on the front desk staff.